Hello, I am back for another video. I wasn't planning on this necessarily, but I had a really good time with the last one. It was very cathartic for me, and I appreciate all of the very positive feedback that I got from sharing that video, which is super important because it's comes from such a vulnerable place to share that kind of a thing. And so I definitely appreciate those who took the time to give me positive feedback regarding that video. I also was delighted to receive such a great question. Somebody who watched my videos, they asked, what was your shelf breaker? For those who might not know what a shelf breaker is, it's kind of like saying, what was the last straw? In Mormonism, we have this kind of like a metaphor where if there's something you don't agree with, if there's something you don't understand, if there's something that bothers you, they say put it on the shelf. It means just put it aside. Someday you'll get the answers. You may not know now, you may not get the answers right away, but someday you'll get the answers. It's really just a way of kind of dismissing the valid questions that people have and the problems that people have, and just saying, just have faith. Just have faith. Everything will be known someday. And whether or not you want to admit it, and if you are ex-Mormon or questioning Mormon or a nuanced Mormon or a true believing Mormon, you're still going to have a shelf. Every Mormon has a shelf. Everybody has something that they are thinking about, that they struggle with, or they have questions about, or don't agree with, and that would be your shelf. So I appreciated that question because I think it's just such a really good icebreaker. If you have somebody you love who has left the church, or even if they're making a decision that you don't agree with, or it's a curiosity. It's a curiosity about what they are thinking and what they are feeling and what their reasons are. Because if you know somebody and you think they're a reasonable person, they're a good person, I have known them up until this point to be a good person, instead of making assumptions about them, realize that they probably have gone through a lot of thought process, a lot of internal dialogue. They have real reasons for making the decisions that they're making. And so I just really think that's amazing. It's like, I don't know if anybody has seen Ted Lasso. I love that show so much. And what he says is, be curious, not judgmental. And I think that asking what was your shelf breaker is it's a curious question that opens doors and opens conversation. So I love that. And I did answer her question a little bit, kind of sort of in a very blunt way in the comments, but I kind of started to write the answer, and I just kind of realized that there's just too much, and I just can't answer it just in a short little question, or even in a long answer on my on my feed there. I just needed to take the time to make an actual video, because it's so wrapped up in everything. I do want to say, first of all, again, like I did in the last one, I'm not interested in arguments. I'm not interested in accusations. I am more than happy to have a conversation, an intelligent conversation. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to discuss something. If you have an experience you want to share, I'm more than happy to validate you and talk about that. If your questions are genuine, I am not even remotely interested in entertaining contention. So if you just want to come on here and give apologist answers and tell me that I don't understand the church that I was born and raised in for 41 years, if you want to tell me that I'm going to hell, if you want to tell me any of those things, I will not engage with you. I will delete your comments. This is my space. This is my feed, and I am perfectly allowed to talk about those things. I'm also not going to talk about the truth claims of the church. I'm not going to talk about whether it's true. I'm not going to talk about whether Joseph Smith is a true prophet. I'm not going to talk about those things. I will say that I don't believe it's true. I don't believe there's a God. I don't believe that that Joseph was a prophet. I don't think he saw God. I don't believe that the Book of Mormon is true. I don't believe those things, and I'm not going to give evidences of those. I will suggest that if you have questions or if you're curious, then you go and visit the podcasts. Mormon Stories is a great resource. Those are mainly, there's evidence there as well, but mainly that's stories from people who have left the church. I promise you, they are not angry. They are not, I mean, some of them are angry, but like they have reasons to be angry, but it's not just because they're angry and have a vendetta about the church. Like, these are real people's experiences, and you know, the only goal that is engaged with that is in telling those stories is just to help people just feel validated and not alone, and like they have people who understand where they're coming from. If you want data and evidence and you know, things that can back up and be proven. Not everything can be proven per se, but like there is evidence. There's written evidence. There's articles, newspaper articles, certificates. There's you know, just real data, real evidence, real statistics, real things. And if you want those kinds of things, you can go and listen to LDS Discussions. It is an absolutely fantastic, very non-biased way to get information about the truth claims of the church. That's not what my goal is. I am not educated enough on those areas in order to portray that information for you. I'm not interested in arguing about it. And not only that, but that is also, the LDS Discussions is a perfect resource for you to go and get that information rather than me showing you and like reiterating it, because it's all perfect and it's right there. So that is what I would suggest if you're interested in truth claims. My goal is to express my personal experience with all of this and to just kind of be like a moral support for people who may have had similar thoughts as me, or who maybe just need somewhere to go to feel validated and heard and understood and seen. Not only that, but it's also, like I said, the last one was very cathartic for me. It helped me. I just felt so unburdened last time, and I liked that a lot. And so I think I will continue these as it applies. Maybe here and there I will have questions. I would love that. If you have questions, I could make a video and answer those questions, or, you know, we can connect on some level, or maybe, you know, I'll just make a list of things that are important to me to talk about. But just have that disclaimer on there that if you're coming here to fight, I'm not going to. I'm just going to get rid of the comments. It's not something I'm interested in. You don't have to listen to me. You can definitely scroll on. I'm not hurting you. I am asking you to please leave me alone about it, okay? Otherwise, like, let's talk about our experiences. So I think it's really important to, this is not scripted. I do have a couple of notes this time, because I watched my last video and I do ramble in a few places. I can't guarantee that I'm not going to do that again. It's unscripted because I feel like I don't want to be reading a teleprompter. I don't want to be reading, you know, a script. It feels like it would be very, non-emotional. It would just be like, okay, let me monotone read this thing. And it's so much, like it's impossible to kind of to write that down and then read it off. So I'm just not going to do that. Because of that, I guarantee you I'm going to forget something. I am going to probably miss a point. And so I might make a note, or I might make another video or something to add to this, because I'm just kind of I'm doing this off script. I'm just going to talk like we're face to face. So there's my disclaimer for that as well. Please keep in mind that my shelf breaker, the shelf breaker that I had is funny because it's the one thing that I never had a problem with. I always said, I wanted to be a nuanced Mormon. I say nuanced. I didn't really know that word when I kind of started becoming that, but I joined some groups, and that's kind of the word that they associate with is a nuanced Mormon, meaning, we understand that everybody's in a different kind of walk of life. We all have different experiences. We may have different revelation for ourselves. And so it's a little bit more liberal of an idea regarding the church. And so I was kind of, for years and years and years, I was a nuanced Mormon, where I kind of thought like I could be a buffet Mormon. I don't know if you've ever heard that, where you just kind of pick and choose the things that you believe in, and then you discard the things that you don't believe in. And so you don't have to follow everything. You just follow the things that feel right to you. And that worked for a little while. It worked while it worked. But it obviously didn't work forever. And the problem with that is because everything in the Mormon church, every single belief, every single teaching, it all is so intermingled that it collapses if you remove one. So you can say, well, I no longer believe in this specific facet, and that's fine. But then like eventually you come to this other facet and you're like, but that's wrapped up in here. And if I don't believe in this, I can't believe in this. And that falls apart as well. And so eventually everything is crumbling. And for some people it's faster than others. Not gonna lie, like I really wish that mine had crumbled. Mine crumbled really fast once I got to a certain point. Once I got to a certain point in my deconstruction, it fell apart quick, and I made the decision very quick to leave. But in the meantime, while I was kind of gathering things on my shelf, it took a long time because I just was hanging on, and it just depends on the person. Like, some people read the CES letter and the next day they leave the church. I've never read the CES letter. I still haven't. I listened to the LDS discussions and pretty much decided that at that point, once I read the CES letter, or once I listened to those, the CES letter was like redundant. It's the same things, the same questions in that letter as are given. And I was over it. But everybody's a little bit different. So just keep that in mind, that my shelf breaker was tithing, and I've never, ever, ever struggled with tithing. I'll illustrate this by saying, I became inactive for about 2 years when I was in college. I lived with my boyfriend. I drank alcohol, like every college student does. Like, it was a very, very normal college experience. Nothing excessive. I never did drugs. I never did anything like super bad. But, I was a typical teenage-ish, because into my 20s, college student, and I had those experiences. During that time when I was inactive and I didn't go to church and I didn't follow the commandments that I was supposed to follow, I still I still paid tithing. I didn't go to the church and pay it. I put my tithing in a jar, and I had a cash jar full of hundreds of dollars of cash for 2 years. And when I did go back to church and I took it to my bishop, I paid it for that 2 years. That's how much of not a problem this shelf breaker was for me. Tithing has never been an issue because it just was so ingrained in my head that, well, you get money, you pay 10% tithing. And I had done that since childhood. And I just couldn't break away from that. I've also I've been very lucky that for myself, for the most part, while I've struggled financially a little bit here and there, in various ways, I've never been so destitute that paying tithing was difficult for me, with the exception of the fact that I went through a divorce. And that's another story, of course, another video or whatever. But I did go through a divorce. I was on the church welfare system. I got food from them, and I didn't have anything to pay. I didn't have an income, so I didn't pay tithing during that time. So I've never been so destitute that I couldn't pay tithing. I also have never, financial things have never been a big, and spending and stuff has never been something I struggle with. So not being able to go on a trip, or not being able to buy a bigger house or a boat or something like that hasn't ever been something that bothers me. It's not something that I have places I'd like to go. Sure, I'd like to have a really nice house and be able to redecorate all the time, whatever, that'd be fun. But those aren't things that I look around and I'm jealous of people for, or that I am I wish if I didn't have to pay tithing, I could do those things, that's never been a thing for me. So financial things have not been a thing I've struggled with. Now, keep in mind, also, I know I've been saying that a lot. I'm sorry. Again, I'm off script here. So the shelf is very, very full by the time this breaks my shelf. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is the part that broke my shelf, because like I said, there's a lot of things. Every facet kind of has tendrils in everything else. When you're a Mormon, there's tendrils in all the different facets. So it's not it's just oh, tithing is the thing that broke the camel's back. It's wrapped up in other things, and I had problems with those other things before the tithing broke my shelf. So here, I'll go on my list here. The tithing and blessings from paying tithing. This is kind of another thing that I'd like to do a video on sometime, is the prosperity culture. Prosperity culture, or prosperity gospel, is where we are taught that, and again, if this isn't your experience and you don't believe this and you want to come in here and tell me the church doesn't teach that, move right along, because they do teach that. If you didn't internalize that, if you didn't have that be your experience, then this video isn't for you. Okay? Can we just agree with that? I am not the only person who was taught this. I'm not the only person who was brought up believing this. Prosperity culture and gospel is where if you pay tithing, God will reward you financially. So you will have, financial gain, and you'll have big houses, and you'll be able to go on trips, and you'll be able to have, and as a young person, that wasn't something that was obvious to me, or about me. But as I got older and in the last 5, 6 years, it's become a lot more apparent, the judgmentalness that comes from not having the same things as somebody who has a lot. So there is the culture that if somebody is very wealthy, if they have money, if they go on trips, if they can afford boats, if they can afford things, then it is an indication that they are being blessed by God, which means they are righteous and they are doing good things. Whereas if you are not wealthy, if you are poor, if you don't have enough money, if you don't have nice things, your house is small, you'd wear hand-me-downs or like whatever stereotype. If you have those things, or that's what your life is like, then what it means is that you are not being blessed by Heavenly Father, which means that you are doing something wrong and that you are doing something bad. And I'll illustrate this with a story. After 2020, I don't want to go into like all these details. 2020 kicked our butts, and whose butt didn't it kick, right? Like my husband, he was an electrician at the time. He didn't have work because everything was shut down. I luckily had a job that worked from home. I still have that job. I love my job. And I'm so grateful that I had that during 2020 when I could work from home, but my husband was not working. We had everything break down. Like our furnace broke, our water heater broke, like our dryer broke. We had various things that we had to fix, and we got into some debt because of it. Now, back in 2023, so fast forward a couple of years, we were now paying things back and getting out of debt. It's fine. Like nothing's wrong. We're good. We're fine. But it is a little bit tight. And in the meantime, in 2023, we didn't get our tax return until, I'm sorry, it was 2022, not 2023. I'm sorry. Actually, I don't remember if it was last year or if it was the year before. It was 2022 or 2023, either way. Same thing was it, like we were still, kind of like we were making our house payments. We were able to buy groceries, all those things, but we hadn't gotten our tax return. It was like September. So I was waiting and trying to get, like, I had kids in band that I needed to pay for their band fees. I needed to pay for school fees. I had to take my daughter out of her gymnastics and ballet classes because I didn't have that money coming in, and that chunk of money that we get typically takes care of like a lot of the things for my kids. It takes care of Christmas, takes care of, a lot of things on our list. And we were getting it. It just was stuck in the system. Like it was really delayed. I'm pretty sure it was 2022 again, now that I think about it, because I think everybody's tax return was really delayed that year. And then on top of that, like I wasn't getting my child support from my divorce. It was really, really stressful. And I had things that my kids needed, and I wasn't able to do those things. It was my money. It was money I was supposed to have. And somebody I knew that I had gotten really close to, she called me for something unrelated. But in the meantime, like she kind of heard that I was like stressed in my voice and I was kind of frustrated. And so we talked a little bit and I cried about it. And I was just venting. Like I wasn't asking for a loan. I wasn't asking for money. I just was like, I'm really frustrated about this thing. And they keep telling us our tax return is going to come in, but then it keeps getting pushed back. And I don't know how I'm going to make these ends meet. And I'm frustrated. And she goes, well, are you paying your tithing? And I was like, yeah, I'm paying my tithing, but I don't understand what that has to do with anything. Like, what does that have to do with my tax return not coming in? She's like, well, if you're paying your tithing, then everything is going to be okay. There's a fly. Everything is going to be all right. And you always hear in, sacrament meeting, during fast Sunday testimony meetings, or in Relief Society lessons, these people will say, I paid my tithing, and then my paycheck was really low and it was really hard and we were really struggling. But, after I didn't want to pay my tithing because it was really hard. And, but I did. And then everything worked out and I had enough money. And it really bothers me because, like, first of all, everything works out anyway. I've never looked at my paycheck. I literally have never looked at my paycheck and thought, I don't want to pay tithing. This is going to be so hard. I planned for that. I have always planned for that. And so I always paid my tithing, and it was not difficult for me to do it. And I just lived within that means. And so it's frustrating and I've not had that experience. I mean, everything has worked out, and I guess like that is a blessing on its own. I don't want to diminish any like actual blood. Like it's a blessing that things have always worked out for me, that I've been able to always have a roof over my head. I've always been able to feed my kids and that kind of a thing. But, sometimes it didn't work out. Sometimes there wasn't enough money in my account. Sometimes I had to take my kids out of lessons they were in. Sometimes I had to get cheaper food that wasn't as healthy for us or wasn't what we prefer to eat. Sometimes I wasn't able to buy gas and I had to walk places, or sometimes Ches and I didn't get to do date nights because we didn't have the money for it because we paid tithing. And, people all over this world don't pay tithing and have financial struggles and then still figure out how to make things work. It's not connected. It's just not. And to be told that was super frustrating to me, because not only did it dismiss the problem that I was having, like I just needed to have better faith. I just needed to just be better, because it was going to be okay. Well, I knew it was going to be okay. It was my money. It was supposed to be coming. I was stressed out. I needed a friend who would listen to me and be like, yeah, that freaking sucks. And then it would be fine. The sun is going down, so I hope it doesn't get too dark before I finish this. I will try to be brief. It's already not brief. We're already 26 minutes in. So it is what it is. Whatever. If I have to turn on a light, I will. Anyway, so that's what I needed, was just, I needed a friend to commiserate with. But then on top of that, asking me if I was paying my tithing was an indication that there was an idea that I wasn't. It was an indication that there was a possibility that I was being punished because I wasn't doing something correctly. And that was insulting. I'm not going to lie. It was very, very insulting. And I struggled with that and that feeling, because I know we're not supposed to be offended, but it was offensive. It was mean. It was really mean, especially since, again, this was not something I ever struggled with. I have never struggled with tithing. Let's see. Obviously, 2019, we're all over the place here. I'm sorry, I'm not going in a timeline. Like I said, this isn't a timeline kind of thing. This is an everywhere kind of thing and a tendril kind of thing. So 2019, the whistleblower, when he announced that the church had over $1 billion, that bothered me. Not that we had $1 billion, but all of the things that went along with it. The fact that that our tithing wasn't being used the way we were told it was being used. That was super frustrating. But also, like, let's think about this, okay? And I'm going to put this into perspective because it comes later about some of the things that like were the literal actual shelf breakers. $1 billion, $1 billion. You would need to earn $10,000 per day for 274 years in order to make $1 billion. We have $100 billion. The church has $100 billion. If you were given $5,000 every single day since Columbus came to America in 1492, you still would not have $1 billion today. $1 billion, let alone $100 billion. Okay, so with all of that in mind, that really, it didn't bother me at first, like in the sense that it was like a shelf breaker. It was like, well, whatever the church does with it, or the people who are in charge do with my money when I give it to them as tithing, if they don't use it righteously, then that's on them. That's their problem. I've paid my tithing. So I am absolved of the responsibility. I've done it. I've done what I've asked to do. I've been asked to do. And so I'm good. And I said that, and I believed that too, but then like I sat on it for a while, you know. But here's the thing. Okay. I've got like a lot of notes here. Okay. So the temple is supposed to be the end all be all of the covenants we can make in this lifetime. It ensures that you're going to go to the celestial kingdom. You make covenants there. You have secret handshakes and new names and all these things that are for more videos. But it's the end all be all. The goal for every Mormon person and every Mormon family is supposed to be to go to the temple and get sealed there. Okay, so in order to go to the temple, you need to pay tithing. You have to be paying 10% of your income. And even poor people. Now, think about this, okay? If you're a poor person and you make $100 and you pay 10% of your income of tithing, which is $10, you still have $90 to live on. But if you are a person, then $90 can't do anything, okay? So maybe, you know, we're using small numbers just for perspective here, $90. But let's say you're a wealthy person and you make $1,000. You pay $100 on your $1,000, you still have $900 to live on. 10% kind of seems like this really good round fair number for everybody to pay, but really poor people pay a much higher amount, like in relation to what they live on, than a wealthy person does. 10% to a wealthy person is drops in the bucket versus somebody who is trying to decide if they're going to pay tithing or feed their children. So when that happens and somebody is not wealthy and they're looking at their paycheck and they're saying, I don't know how to pay tithing and also feed my children, the church will say, pay the tithing, and then we'll take care of you. We'll give you some food. Sometimes bishops will say, we might pay some of your bills so that you can use that money to buy groceries instead of paying your bills, or instead of buying, instead of buying groceries out of the tithing money. The problem with this is that not everybody is given food. And I have been a recipient of food from the church. I am very, very grateful for that. I think it's important to recognize that we can be both disenchanted and also be grateful for certain things that were good in relation to that organization. It's totally possible to feel two things. So don't come at me. But I'll tell you this story. In 2023, and I know this was 2023, because I was in the Relief Society presidency. I was the second counselor, and we had a training meeting. It was July, and I remember it was July because I had 3 tattoos at the time. I'll have to show them to you someday. I think there are pictures of them on my feed. I have 3. I've got a butterfly one. I've got this cute little cottagecore bee one, and I've got one on my leg. It's flowers, and I have 3 tattoos, and I was wearing a short dress and with short sleeves, and it was showing my tattoos, so they were visible. The entire training was about the self-help or like self-reliance section of the handbook, and on the website there's articles about self-help and everything, because the idea was that they wanted us to take on more of the needs of the wards so that the bishops could focus on the youth. Don't get me started on that because I have opinions there too, but they wanted to have us be handling some of those things. And so they did a series of skits to help us kind of figure out how we would approach a certain problem. And one of the problems was how to do a food order. The skit was that there was a woman who was having trouble being able to afford food for her family. And so she was trying to get a hold of the bishop so she could get a food order, meaning that she could be given like basically a grocery list to take to the bishop's storehouse and then be given food for her to feed her family. And so, that's fine and whatever. It just was this little skit, but then we were kind of waiting in line to get our dessert. And there was this, I don't know who she was. I didn't know this lady. I'm sure she was perfectly nice otherwise from outside of this experience, but we were standing there in the line to get our little dessert after the lesson, after the training. And she was going on about how, well, she just really hates it when she goes into a house to create a food order and she sees that these people have tattoos up and down their arms. Like, if they can afford tattoos, they really should be able to afford their own food and they shouldn't have to be asking the church for it. And I just looked at her and I was like, you realize that once a person gets a tattoo and they pay for that tattoo, it no longer costs money, right? Like, they pay for it, it's done, it's there forever. It doesn't disappear just because they lost their job and they're like, oh, can't afford you anymore, you know? And she was like, well, they just don't need tattoos. If they had just followed the prophet's example and what he said, and they shouldn't have gotten tattoos in the first place, they would have that money and would be able to live on that and get food. And I was like, really? Like, tattoos are a couple $100s. They're not going to buy groceries, not more than once anyway. But would you say that about like a Disney trip, a Disney vacation that you took 5 years ago? You take a Disney trip and vacation and it costs $10,000. That's how much it cost my family, because my family's huge. I don't know how much it costs everybody else's, but we went in 2016 and it was tons of money. So you go to Disneyland and you spend a ton of money, and it's okay because you have that money at the time to be able to spend it. You've got a job and everything. But 5 years later, you lose your job and you need to get money from the bishop's storehouse. Was that trip a waste of time and a waste of money? Because that trip costs way more than a tattoo. And I don't know. I hope I wasn't as flamboyant with my gesticulations and stuff. I hope I was a little bit more, I don't know, but I was kind of upset about it. I was like, really? You're going to judge these people? And this is the problem, is because people like her, and she just kind of like rolled her eyes at me and walked away. She didn't want to talk about it anymore after that. But the people in these positions, these leadership positions, they don't have any training. They don't have any idea of what is realistic for different kinds of people. So if you want to get a food order and you say, I can't afford food, the church can send somebody in. It can be a Relief Society presidency member. It can be a bishopric member. It can be an elders quorum member. One of those people can go into their home and they can say, okay, how much money are you making? What are you spending it on? You need to cut here, 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 and here. And so if I like lost my job, like when I was divorced, going through my divorce, I have been very privileged. I have had great people I have worked with. But I have friends and immediate family and people I know personally. And as a Relief Society presidency member, I saw this firsthand. So it's not that it doesn't exist just because I didn't have that experience. We need to believe people when they tell us what they experienced. The thing is that they can go in and when I was going through my divorce, and therefore I was on the church welfare system and I got to get food, not by the person who was making my food orders, thank goodness, but other people would say, well, why don't you just sell your van? Why do you still have a cell phone? Turn that off, then you won't be paying for it. Well, first of all, my van was paid off. I didn't owe any money on it. I didn't have a payment. But even if I had a payment and it wasn't paid off, you have to have a car or a vehicle in order to get to a job. So you can't just sell your car. Okay. Like, I had a cell phone that my ex-husband was paying for because he has kids and I needed the phone to be able to, get a job. I needed a phone to be able to talk to him about custody and like switching and everything like that. Lawyers, the things that we were going through, and until our divorce was final, he paid for that. And then I got help from my father, and then I got help from my parents, not he's my dad, you know, but I don't mean that to sound like super formal, but I got help from my dad to pay for it. And then eventually I got remarried and like, you know, I had a job and I paid for things myself. But in the meantime, I did need my phone. I couldn't just turn it off. I couldn't get a job without a phone. I couldn't get to a job without my car. Selling my car wasn't going to help anything. Likewise, I had Netflix. Again, my ex paid for it because he had kids. He had kids at home in my house who he was helping to take care of. It was his account. He kept it on because he had children there. So to look at these things and have people go in there and say, cancel your Netflix, you're going to have $15 more a month to buy those groceries with, you know, like anybody can go in there and just tell them, no, you need to cut down your expenditures and we're not going to pay for groceries. You also have to be a member of the church. You have to at least be going to church. You have to be paying tithing in order to be able to get these things. So that comes back to the tithing. There are these things I have problems with, but then tithing is wrapped up in all of it. And you have to be paying tithing. The church will say, you pay tithing, we will get you food. But you don't have any money to pay tithing on, let alone buy food. So it's kind of a conundrum. Now, when it comes to the temple, because I kind of got off track there. When it comes to the temple, everybody needs to be paying tithing, even if you're poor. And it's the end all be all to go to the temple and get sealed to your family, to get married in the temple, blah, blah, blah. And there are families who literally, and they talk about it every single conference. I dare you to go look up the talks about people who sold everything in order to travel to go and get sealed in the temple. The thing is that with $100 billion, why does any family have to sell everything they have in order to go to the temple to get sealed with their family and then come home to nothing? And every single conference, there is a talk. There is a talk about people who did that. And the church acts like this is some great act of faith. And really, it's deplorable. And people's tithing are going into this pot of $100 billion where it's just sitting there accumulating, and families are sacrificing literally everything they have to go to the temple. And you know, people take this money and they pay this money, they no matter how poor they are, and they give it to the church, and they think they're getting blessings for it. Now, here's the thing is, we do covenant to pay tithing in the temple. We make a covenant, but it's not really specifically a covenant to pay tithing. It's literally a covenant that we will give everything to the church, not just 10%, everything to the church. And, that's called the law of consecration. It's literally socialism. You give everything to the church, and the church is supposed to give you everything that you need. So we do make that covenant. The thing is that we don't really know we're going to make that covenant until we go into the temple. Like some people might know a little bit, but the temple is extremely secret. Secret, not sacred, guys. I'm not going to argue with you on that. That's the way it is. It's secret, not sacred, in my opinion. And so we do make that covenant. And the covenants in the temple are not really told to you what they're going to be until you're making them. And that's, again, another video to make, another thing that we can talk about another time. But informed consent is not a thing in the church. You don't know what you're covenanting to until you've covenanted to it already, in the face of your family and your friends and people who are close to you, and being told that, you know, like you need to get up and leave if you don't want to do this. And you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing. So, yeah, it's very intimidating. And the thing about it is that it comes back to is you have to be actively and faithfully paying tithing before you're allowed to go to the temple. So you're doing this covenanted thing that you have to do, that you covenant to later. You don't covenant in the temple and say, I'm going to make a choice to do this thing and make this covenant. You have to be living that covenant before you're allowed to go into the temple. So let's see. Some things I have issues with regarding that. Sometimes people don't like the way that their tithing is being used, and so they will choose charities to donate it to. I've always really liked tithing as like a testimonial that God was more important to me than my money and financial gain. And so I liked that was a tribute from me, and I liked the idea of that. I liked that my tithing was said to be going to help people who needed help, who needed to be able to eat, who needed to be able to get to the temple, you know. So I did like those things about it. But I have friends who have done this. I've listened to lots of Mormon stories where people have done this. People will say, I am taking my 10% and I'm donating it to this charity that I know is accredited and I know what they're doing with the tithing that I'm giving them, instead of giving it to the church who's using it the way I don't want them to. And the church will withhold their temple recommend because they're not giving the money to the church. Even though it's charitable, they're not giving the money to the church. I have heard of bishops that make you back pay. If you go for a while and don't pay tithing and you come and you say, I would like to get my temple recommend, I'm going to start paying my tithing. I have known bishops to say, no, you need to pay back the tithing that you missed while you were not paying before you. And for some people, that's years and years. Like, that's impossible. They're never going to get that paid off. It's not even a debt, you know? Let's see, child support. I've known bishops to say that you should pay tithing on child support because it's an increase. Again, another video because the sun is going down. This video is almost an hour long. It's just, I just disagree with that. And then the poor people who can't pay, they will lose their recommends. They will lose their recommends if they don't pay. So really, what it comes down to it, and the thing that, like, I had already had all these problems. I had already had these on my shelf. I was thinking about these tithing things. I was thinking about it. And to be honest, like, I didn't leave the church immediately after my shelf broke because there were other things. Like, I still believed in the Book of Mormon at that time. I was still like, but what do I do though? Because where am I going to go to a different church? Am I going to, like, just stay and like sit it out and hope things get better and be like really vocal about things because I love the Book of Mormon? What am I going to do? My kids, I still had active children in the church, and so I was like, I don't want to leave them in the church by themselves. Like, I don't want to miss temple weddings. Like, what do I do? Like, so I stayed a little while after that. But it was absolutely the time that I was like, okay, I'm done. I have to figure out a way out of this church. And I didn't leave right away. I was kind of figuring out how to leave. But it was the time that I decided, like, I don't want to be associated with this church anymore. And I actively chose not to renew my temple recommend. And I decided I wasn't going back to the temple because I wasn't going to pay tithing anymore. But that happened when I was reading the story in the Bible. There is one scenario, just one, where Jesus gets so angry and so livid that he takes time to go away by himself and create his own whip, and then came back and just obliterated the scene in front of the temple. And that was when the people in front of the temple were making money off of people trying to get into the temple. They were selling animals to sacrifice. They were taking money and making a profit off of the temple. Considering the temple is supposed to be the end-all be-all and the place that we are supposed to go to get our covenants regardless of what our financial status is, this made a big impact on me. Jesus did not get this mad at the widow who couldn't pay very much tithing. He didn't get mad at the woman who was taken in adultery, which is a sin that's supposed to be like unto murder. He didn't get this angry at Judas, who betrayed him and gave him to his captors. He didn't even get this angry at the people who tortured and murdered him. So when I read that, which I'd read a billion times, but it hadn't sunk in quite that way. When I read that scripture and I sat and I thought about it, and I realized that the church was making a profit off of people who just wanted to be able to be with their families forever, that was what broke my shelf. Now, I know this was really long, so if you've listened to this and you're still here, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you. I definitely welcome more questions. And I appreciate any support. And of course, I'm going to hopefully be making more of these videos to talk about these things. If you are somebody who is struggling, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to talk with you. If you have something unkind to say, keep it to yourself. I don't want to hear those kinds of things. So thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you soon.